The feature presentation today is my friend and at times partner in crime.
Yes.
Alexandra Levit, who's the author of Humanity Works, and I can see on the slide deck there's one here. I just finished reading this book on the flight out here and really enjoyed it. A lot of the information early on is directly related to what we're talking about here today. And then there's some fun anecdotes on Gen Z and Gen X movies and music and stuff like that. It was the music ones that I kind of like. It's like, oh wow, she has the same taste in music as I do. I felt bad for her. Alex is going to talk about merging technologies and people in the workforce.
Oh, okay, good.
She's one of the sort of the first concrete ways or substantial ways that she and I had the opportunity to work together is that she's the chair of the Career Advisory Board, which is a think tank sponsored by DeVry University. And I've been on that as a board member for 2 years now. 2 years. Yep. I'm on double secret probation, so we'll see how long that continues. But I don't think I've been awful on it. And then Alex can introduce her panelists and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
All right, thank you, Alex.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Welcome to Google. Welcome to College Recruiter Bootcamp. My name is Alexandra Levit. I'm a business and workplace author, speaker, and consultant. I also consider myself to be a true 21st century employee. In the last 3 months, I have bid on 24 new projects. I've worked for about 6 clients, and I've done 2 conference calls in the middle of the night. In learning how to become a 21st century employee, I have mastered skills like diplomacy, interpersonal problem solving. I have learned skills like how to be marketable, how to always put myself forward. Now, my interest in the future actually started way back in 1988. I lived down the street from the headquarters of the World Future Society. And my dad and I were really into sci-fi. So my dad was partial to Star Trek. I was into Ender's Game. Ooh, yeah. And so we wanted a tour of the World Future Society. So we went down the street and we got a tour. And I'll never forget this one technology. It was called interactive television. And the idea was it would be a device. You would push a button and boop, instantaneously you would get to hear the Cosby Show episode you'd missed last Thursday. You'd push another beep, and instantaneously you would get to hear the new Madonna single that you had missed on the radio that day. Now, if you all think about it, what technology was that the precursor for that you all have within a foot of your person? Someone said it back there. The smartphone. And that's when I became hooked on the future. Now, my interest in the future converged with my interest in HR when I wrote a book called They Don't Teach Corporate in College in 2004. And I started getting asked to talk to audiences like you all about young professionals specifically. And that's when people started asking me, what do you think young professionals are going to need to be prepared for in terms of the future of work? And so that brings us here today. That's mostly the subject of the new book, Humanity Works, which you all will get a copy of. What we're going to be doing over the next hour or so, I'm going to spend about the next 15 minutes. It's going to be a speed round of some of the future work trends that you all need to be keeping in mind as people in the recruiting field. So we're going to talk about changing demographics, tech advances, evolving structures, human skills, and customization. And if you think about this, I like to call it the space shuttle view, because we are starting with demographics. Who is going to be available to work and where? That's looking down at the Earth from a space shuttle perspective. Then we move to the company level. Then we move to the individual level. So that's roughly the structure of the remarks for the next 15 minutes. And you will have to bear with me that I'm going to go through these very quickly, because normally I would spend a couple of hours talking through these 5. But because I want to get to our wonderful panel and I want you to hear all of the insights they have about AI and recruiting, we are going to go through these relatively quickly. So starting with changing demographics, important thing to realize is that who is going to be available to work is going to be changing. And specifically, China and India, as developing nations, will become the leading exporters of qualified talent. The population in developed nations such as the US and the UK is actually going to decrease. So we're going to see more workers, at least in the professional world, coming in from other places, which means that we will be sourcing talent from places that we didn't source it before. Where we might have been able to get US workers before, we are going to be going to countries like China and India. The baby boomers are going to be in retirement, but what that means is a little bit different than prior generations who went into retirement. Prior generations, when they retired, they did things like move down to Florida and play mahjong and golf. The boomers are showing us that they don't want to do this, that they want to contribute in meaningful ways. Maybe not working 60 to 80 hours a week, but they want to keep working for their companies. And this has impact for us as recruiting and HR professionals because we have to find a way to keep them in our organizations. I still get calls to this day asking me what to do about my millennial entry-level employees. Millennials aren't entry-level anymore. Right. You all know that. The oldest millennials are turning 39 years old this coming year. They're the leaders. In fact, a recent study I did with Deloitte determined that as of 2 years ago, all global working millennial professionals, half of them considered themselves to be leaders, meaning they had decision-making authority and at least 2 direct reports. They are entering leadership positions an average of 10 years earlier than prior generations. The reason for that is that the generation in between the boomers and the millennials is very small. Who knows what that generation is? X. Great generation. I'm a part of it myself, but we're little. Not enough of us to take over for the boomers, and so you see the millennials rising. Now, the entry-level people we do have to keep in mind are who? Z. Generation Z. The oldest ones graduated from college this past May. They are the oldest. They are different from the millennials in that they are more independent. They are used to getting answers via Google or Siri. They hack their education, meaning whatever they need to know, they're going to go and find it out. They're not going to wait for a teacher or a parent to tell them, or an employer. They're into tours of duty, meaning that they're going to go into a company, they're going to achieve a goal, and then they may or may not move on. Now, what I hope with Gen Z is that we are proactive about their development. With the millennials, we were constantly being reactive. We didn't expect them to have much of an impact. And to this day, we are reaping the consequences of that. So we have an opportunity now as recruiters to really find out what this generation wants and needs and to deliver it in real time. Labor shortages and geographic skills mismatches. We see countries like Russia having a shortage of 20 million working-age people by 2030. And a country like Russia might need people who are in a specific skill area that, let's say, India or China has a lot of. But where we're running into problems, and some of you, I'm sure, have clients like this, is when companies say, no, I want people in my immediate geographic area to have those skills. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means and what you can do in a moment. And then finally, we have the rise of transformational leadership. And this is driven by the millennials who are not into the command and control hierarchical style. Transformational leaders are receptive to different points of view that might come from the bottom of an organization. They're into cognitive diversity, meaning that they want to hear perspectives from all around, from all different types of people. And they're comfortable with uncertainty because they recognize that one of the principal leadership skills is agility in the 21st century. So I bring that up in demographics just because I feel like the millennials are driving this. They are becoming the leaders and they enjoy this style. Next, let's talk about tech advances. So of course, that's the main subject of our conference today, specifically AI. I hear a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of doomsday scenarios around automation taking over all of our jobs and humans are not going to be employed. And when we look at the research, we actually see that the majority of jobs, about 60%, this is the latest research from McKinsey, 60% of occupations will be affected by automation in the next 10 years. But will all of those jobs go away? No. Only about 30% of the tasks within those 60% of occupations will be automated, which basically means that automation will replace parts of jobs rather than complete jobs. And in many cases, automation will add jobs. And let me give you an example of that. Wherever there is a machine inserted into a process, there needs to be a human being behind it to build it, to design it, to figure out how to manage it, to fix it when it's broken, and to redeploy it. I'm familiar with an organization in Chicago, it's a pharmaceutical company, that is introducing a chatbot. You would think the chatbot was going to help with the onboarding function and eliminate some human jobs. Instead, what's happened is no fewer than 15 HR professionals are involved with the rollout of this chatbot. Those people were all doing different things before. Now part of their responsibility is managing this chatbot. So those jobs have been created. Big data started in the recruiting and HR field, where we were starting to use things like predictive analytics to determine where our most successful hires would come from, what schools we should target, what skills should we look at. Now the good news for you all is you're ahead of the curve on this. Sometimes people laugh at me when I say HR is ahead of the curve, but that is being filtered to other parts of the organization. And I mention this to you because you are going to be asked for your expertise in using big data and predictive analytics to make the workforce as a whole more productive. And you all are ahead, so you need to be prepared for that. Human-machine hybrid teams, it sounds scary to a lot of people. What do I mean by that? Do I mean a robot is going to be sitting next to you in the cube? Really what I mean is that we're going to have parts of tasks taken over by automation, by robots. And that is starting in the form of the chatbot. A chatbot is a piece of code. It's an algorithm that accomplishes a basic task. And in some cases, a chatbot can even be in the form of a device. So my favorite example right now is Alexa for Business. How many of you have Alexa in your home? So Alexa's coming to a workforce near you. And Alexa is going to serve as our intelligent personal assistant that might do everything from setting up a meeting, to reminding people to come, to pulling down the screen and loading the PowerPoint, and then cleaning up the room when you're finished. That's where we're going to see the human-machine hybrid teams really start. Now, as machines get more sophisticated, we're going to see them doing more complex tasks. But for right now, we are really seeing it in the form of chatbots. And then finally, the maturation of deep learning and effective computing. How many of you have Gmail? Almost everyone. Have you noticed in the last 3 months that Gmail has become smarter? It becomes smarter, I feel like, every day as it learns more about how you answer and respond to emails. And it makes suggestions. It's learning from the experience. Now, of course, there's a limit to what machines can learn for a time. I think right now we can expect to see that it's pretty basic. But at some point, they are going to start to be able to mimic and replicate human emotion. And this is known as effective computing. We already see it in some departments of customer service, where a customer service bot will be able to read body language, will be able to assess how a person is feeling given what they say, and if they're in person, what they look like. My favorite future implementation of this that I've heard about is the salary robot, where instead of going to your boss and presenting a case on why you should get a raise, you're going to have to present that case in front of a robot that has effective computing ability. And that robot will assess, how confident are you that you should get this raise? It'll analyze the business case for sure. Do you deserve it or not? But it'll also be able to give feedback on how likely are you to walk if you don't get that money? That's effective computing. And we are going to see huge strides made in this in the next 10 to 15 years. So be on the lookout for the salary robots. Evolving structures, the way we work, the places we work is going to change. So most of you are familiar with the idea, being adjacent to the HR field, that flex work and contract work are becoming pervasive. This makes sense because companies are not wanting to pay significant overhead and benefits and money to house everyone and to give them remarkable items of food like we see here at Google if they don't have to. And also, we look at the sourcing issues and the fact that we have these geographic skills mismatches where we can't get full-time employees to be available. So we have to have these virtual teams that are sourced from other places. So we have flex work, meaning you don't necessarily have to be anywhere from 9 to 5, that you can either work maybe 3 days a week and 2 from home, or you can work a split schedule. I've even heard of things like maternity leave partners, where 2 employees want to get pregnant, one goes off for 3 months, comes back, the other one goes off. Flex work can take all sorts of forms. And the most important thing to recognize about flex work, I always tell HR folks, is you've got to have a policy. And you've got to limit the choices that people have. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for disaster. And then contract work, of course, refers to people who don't work full-time for any one organization. This too can be problematic because some organizations don't know what makes a contract worker and what doesn't. And in fact, the IRS has very strict stipulations, and globally other countries do as well. So you have to know about those. You also have to know how to systematize your contract workforce. What I see happening in a lot of situations is I see one manager bringing in a contract worker through a process. Somebody else in the organization is doing it completely differently. And I haven't seen it happen yet, but I think it's coming. The contract workers are going to cause organizations great pain because someone is going to end up saying something to a customer or a stakeholder that they were not allowed to say because they were not onboarded, because contract workers don't get onboarded. So when you guys look at this from a recruiting perspective, you have to be prepared for some systemization of how we bring in these contract workers. Swarm teams. I did not make up the term swarm. It came from Gartner, which is an industry analyst term. But swarming refers to a team that is assembled very quickly for the express purpose of solving a particular business problem. And then when that problem is solved, the team is disbanded. So this impacts you all as recruiting professionals because you may not be recruiting for full-time positions. You may be recruiting for business problems specifically. And the swarm teams may either continue to work at the organization or they might go on and do something else immediately afterward. These teams are going to be powered by some new technologies. Augmented reality, that's what AR is. Augmented reality refers to you look at your landscape, you look at your real world environment, but you have extra information that's interlaid on top of that. So for example, you're walking down the street with your Google glasses. You might have your Google glasses telling you, hey, I know you like to drink Starbucks at 7:30. There's a Starbucks right on the corner. And it'll pop up in your glasses and it'll tell you exactly where you need to go. That's augmented reality. Virtual reality is something that has great implications for recruiting where you take someone to a completely new environment. So when you're recruiting someone, you could take them into the Googleplex and show them, here's what it's actually like to work here. We will give you a tour. So virtual reality is different in that it's a completely new environment. It's not your existing environment with extra information like augmented reality. And then finally, telepresence. Telepresence just refers to you beaming yourself into an office environment when you might not actually be there. So right now it's very rudimentary. It's just a face on an iPad that's attached to a little rolling robot. And it's great in the sense that you can kind of walk around the office and participate. But there are some challenges with this, as you can imagine. Like, if someone picks up your telepresence robot in an effort to get it out of the way in a hallway, are they invading your personal space? These are some of the issues that telepresence will bring up. And then finally here, the rise of the holacracy. So holacracy refers to an organization without titles, where everybody fights for resources, you make your best case on a given day, and you receive permission to go forward. Now, holacracy is a structure that has its challenges because who signs the checks at the end of the day? Sometimes there is mass chaos because no one is sure what the organizational priorities, mission, vision, and values are. So I bring this up because holacracy is one of those areas I think we all have to be very diligent in saying, okay, let's meet in the middle somewhere on this. We don't have to be quite as hierarchical with all these extra layers, but we do have to have some order because there's a reason the corporate world was created the way it was with managers. And it's so there isn't total chaos. So this is something I think we need to be very prudent about recommending and helping to implement. Human skills. I bring up human skills because this is what we are going to be looking for as recruiters. These are the skills we really need to be emphasizing among our workforce because they are the things that are going to set us apart from smart machines. Creativity and craftsmanship are number one. We see machines even today starting to do creative endeavors. The problem is, a lot of times they miss the mark, and they are incapable of telling if something is any good or not. And the rise of craftsmanship is something that we've seen happen for a couple hundred years. Even as mass production became possible, there's still something about having a human being touch what you've done and touch what you are going to have in your home. And so I think we're going to see the rise of sites like Etsy, where people are making things. And so those people are going to be continually employed in your organizations. Even if a machine can do the work, doesn't necessarily mean people are going to want it to do the work. And that's the same thing with interpersonal sensitivity and empathy. My favorite example here is Japan. Japan tried to automate nursing. They developed a 6-foot-tall white bear called Roe Bear. And the idea was that Roe Bear would take over nursing because they had a nursing shortage. At the end of the day, all Roe Bear was really able to do was move patients in and out of bed and serve them food. When you think about the complex tasks associated with nursing, it's things like walking into a room that's an emergency situation and immediately knowing what specialists you should bring in based on your years of working with those people. It's looking into a patient's eyes and being able to detail the degree of pain that that person is in simply by looking at them. It's being able to sit down and have a conversation with a relative over a difficult diagnosis that a doctor has just given. Those are very complex interpersonal skills that robots can simply not take over. And I think until machines develop consciousness and true empathy, which will probably happen, but not for about, I would guess it's probably at least 30 years away, not something we need to worry about immediately. This is what makes humans human. Learning agility, very important. The days of having a degree and being able to rest on that for 5, 10, 15 years, over. Everyone needs to be responsible for continuously skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. I'm a poster child for this. I'm taking a data analytics course right now because I recommend it all the time, and I don't really know exactly how it works. But I'm taking charge of my own career path, and every single person we recruit needs to be showing that they have this learning agility. And we're going to talk in the panel in a minute about bias, but this is my cautionary tale. Wherever there is bias, and we have algorithms, we're going to see human bias infiltrate those algorithms, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. This is an area where it's not a good quality that humans have, but it's one that's very natural. We just develop sometimes biases based on either prior experience or it's kind of built in due to society. And this is something that no matter how sophisticated we get, no matter how sophisticated machines get, we're going to have to contend with. The last section I want to talk about here before we get to our amazing panel, I don't want to waste too much time before introducing them, laterals and sideways moves, probably the principal area of career customization, which is something that is going to be very important to recruiting folks who are trying to bring people in and show them that they can grow their careers in a particular organization. We are seeing now that the days of moving from point A to point Z, or point B, and then from point A to point C, no longer applies. You don't necessarily look at your boss and say, okay, this is exactly where my career is going to go because my boss did it this way. Now people have more choices than ever. You can do anything you want. And in fact, those of us who advise on careers advise on developing as wide a bench as possible, developing as many cross-functional areas of expertise as you can. We've also referred to these as transferable skills, things like marketing, finance, things that no matter how or where you go in an organization, you might need. And so by facilitating lateral and sideways moves, we encourage people to move throughout an organization and get those skills. So similarly, we see two areas up here. Rotations are an area where a lot of companies are spending a lot of money rotating people through different departments, and they might be on a 3-month or a 6-month course. Now, my advice on this is that this doesn't have to be as expensive as current companies are making it. Rotations can be as simple as some group has an extra project that they might be working on and they are slammed to the wall and they don't have the bandwidth to finish it, but another department in the organization might be able to spare someone who wants to come over and work in that area and learn that expertise. So it can be as simple as having an internal job board where people share responsibilities throughout the organization. Now, of course, as you can imagine, who's the barrier to this kind of thing? HR is not the barrier, believe it or not. The manager is the barrier. We have to be educating our managers that people are not going to want to come in because they're hearing from people like me that they need to develop cross-functional expertise if we don't give them those opportunities. So managers have to stop being so territorial over their people and recognize it's in their best interest to have people who are as wide as possible because they don't know how their departments are going to need to evolve and change. That's a message that's important. Tours of duty, I mentioned those with Gen Z. That's coming into an organization not necessarily prepared to work for the rest of your life or even a few years. You're coming in to solve an express business problem, and when it's done, when you've achieved a goal, when you finish the project, when you can show results, you then renegotiate your contract with the organization. This is pretty rare, I would say, right now, but it's something that I think Gen Z is going to start pushing. School and organizational partnerships is my favorite solution to the geographic skills mismatches issue. I see a lot of companies in rural areas, for example, that want to recruit people from that area, and those people simply don't have the skills. So what we can do about that is partner in our local communities and say, I'm going to source people from the community who have the ability to learn this skill set. I'm going to bring them in. They're going to become trained in exactly the job that they need to do. This is also something that can combat the problem we have with mass unemployment of certain sectors of people. Why can't those people partner with schools to learn very specific skills or partner with the company directly? So my favorite example, Steve mentioned DeVry. DeVry partnered with the FBI because the FBI was having a cybersecurity shortage. They did not have enough people trained in this to fill the pipeline of the FBI. So they partnered with DeVry's College of Information Sciences to develop a curriculum that would directly move people from DeVry into those FBI positions. So that's an example of where the curriculum was developed specifically to fill the skills gap in a particular organization. And this has a lot of promise. And then I close my discussion of customization with an area that some people think is a little bit big brother, and that's productivity wearables. In the next 10 years, not only your career will be customized, but every moment of every day has the ability to be customized because you will wear a device that will be able to tell how often you're interacting with other people, whether you are working fast enough at a particular task. What if your partner is working on a particular task faster and putting out more than you are? Does that mean that your boss should then tell you, I don't think you should do this anymore because so-and-so is doing it faster? This is going to bring up all sorts of privacy-related issues, all sorts of issues around meaningful work. Just because you're not as fast at something, maybe you enjoy it. Maybe you want to do it anyway. And businesses are going to be on top of this due to the impact on the bottom line. They're going to want their employees to be as fast and as efficient as possible. So I bring it up to you because I think you all need to be aware of it. Because right now, as we stand here, or as I stand here and you sit, 10% of organizations are using some form of productivity wearable, particularly with their tech staff. How fast can you code? How much can you put out? What software programs can you learn to use? How productive are you? So career customization, our final trend today. So without further ado, I'm going to sit down. I should probably bring this with me, actually. And I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel. This is our spotlight panel on AI and recruiting. So now we're going to dive down deep into an issue that is near and dear to you all. We've already started talking about it this morning, so hopefully you're warmed up. Now we're going to get a little bit more specific on some of the issues that might have piqued your interest. And without further ado, I will introduce our panel. We start with Jared Bizal. He currently serves as the Manager of Talent Acquisition at CDW, me here in Chicago, a leading Fortune 200 multi-brand technology solutions provider for business, government, education, and healthcare organizations in the US, Canada, and the UK. In this role, Jared is responsible for overseeing all university recruiting and company internship programs, and is also responsible for the management and development of an international team, including acquisitions, onboarding, and training efforts. Welcome, Jared.
Thanks.
Next, we have Doug Berg. Doug is a multi-startup entrepreneur and investor in the talent technology industry. He founded Techies.com, which was the #1 career site for tech professionals, and Jobs2Web, which was the first recruitment marketing platform acquired by SAP in 2011 for over $110 million. And he is now the chief zapper for Zap Info, which is an information automation platform used by over 5,000 talent acquisition pros to easily find, extract, enrich, and share people data across the web. Welcome, Doug. Wahab Owolabi is a passionate builder of communities and networks and the founder of URX and the producer of the URX conference. He's on the recruiting team at Rubrik, where he leads university recruiting. Rubrik has become an employer of choice among top engineering students and ranked in the top 10 of LinkedIn's career launching startups. Wahab has also worked at both Stanford University and Carnegie Mellon University, helping technology companies recruit top talent and helping students launch technical careers. Welcome, Wahab. And then I love to be on panels with other women, so it's my absolute joy to recognize Jennifer Sethry. She is the CEO and founder of Intry, a tech-driven matchmaking service for job applicants and employers. She's an entrepreneur, consultant, thought leader, and senior executive in the tech product, marketing, and operations space. As president, CEO, and VP of multiple technology and consumer product companies, Jennifer has injected creativity, integrity, and innovation into operations, product creation, supply chain, branding, and marketing for startups, as well as public companies around the world. Welcome, Jennifer. So you can see we have a brain trust here of folks who really know about AI and recruiting. And over the next several minutes, what we're going to be doing is starting us off with some questions that we thought you might want to have answered. And so each of us is going to lead off with some answers, and then we are going to have plenty of time for you all to ask your questions of our panelists as well, because rare is it that we get such an incredible group of people together in one place, and we can thank Steve and College Recruiter for that. And let's go ahead and move on to our very first question, which Jennifer is going to address first. How will AI transform the recruiting function in the next decade? Jennifer, would you just like to kick us off?
So thanks for the introduction. I feel just a little bit of pressure after that. So I think, you know, y'all who had the first question on the first panel did a really great job. I think for me, and I think people on the panel, the AI can transform in so many different ways. One is really about bias and helping to eliminate the bias and how you put together job descriptions, how you build resumes, how you eliminate. Have you guys seen the word ninja in job descriptions lately? Right? So ninja, rock star, etc. You see them in a lot of job descriptions. And so one of the ways that AI can do that is well, algorithms and machine learning too. It's a step process, but can really build synonym tables and text spinners and all of those things to find other words that mean the same thing to different people. So when there was the one slide up there that said if you are a security guard, and there are all these different titles, that's one way that AI can really help bridge the gap between gender and help eliminate bias. I think that AI can also, in my current company and other companies that are here in this room, can really facilitate the matching between an employee and a candidate, not just based on skills, but based on their EQ, a personality assessment, a culture assessment. What does their LinkedIn look like? What are the hidden variables that you can find between an employer and a candidate? And AI can really use those things to sort of bubble them up to help the hiring manager find the right person for the right role. I also think within HR is really siloed. You have HR technology, you have traditional HR, and then you have the talent acquisition group in HR. And oftentimes those people don't talk to each other. They are siloed from each other. Sometimes they don't share the same technology. Sometimes they have different enterprise software systems. And I actually think AR can help HR people really become sort of a revenue generator. If HR people and teams can bring in the right person for the right job and there isn't as much attrition, then you spend less money on recruiting and you have the right person in the right job for a longer period of time. I guess those are just some of the things that come to mind.
It's great. It's a great overview. Anyone have something they'd like to add?
Yeah, I think where exactly AI is going to help out throughout the recruiting life cycle is still to be determined. I think from our experience at CEW, though, it's really been the front end after application. That's where we've seen the biggest, I will say, ROI for our recruiting teams, right? How do we get through and identify who are the best candidates? There are a ton of tools out there that touch the entire life cycle. I think as the industry continues to develop, the technology across the entire stack will continue to develop as well.
So I think for us at Rubrik in particular, one of the ways that we've been looking at it is developing talent communities. And so you have so many people that come into your pipeline, and for the most part, you're not going to have enough jobs for everyone at that particular time. But something that we're exploring is, hey, can we utilize AI to maintain touch points at given periods across this individual's career pathway that we can kind of time against either their graduation year of university or their amount of time in a particular job that they've let us know that they're in. So for example, if somebody's been we know sort of like the data around how often people change jobs in the Bay Area, and so if somebody has been in a job for 18 months, that might be a time that we want to go ahead and ping that person if we have a particular role that they're a good fit for. Individually, it's hard to do, but with AI at scale, you can literally go through our open recs and match it against this community that we're working to build. So that's something that we haven't quite figured it out, but we're trying to set that up.
That's terrific.
One thing I'll add, I think that is unique. So we're a member of a talent community where if you get rejected from a role at CUW, we actually invite you to join this shared talent community of member companies, and you'll take an assessment, you'll create a profile in that system, and then it will invite you to apply to other member companies, which I think, how do we continue to utilize AI to match people to jobs they may be a better fit for? The amount of people that apply to our open requisitions is significant, right? So getting smarter around that. I also will say I think there's an opportunity on the front end from a sourcing aspect of, we've actually joined with a couple other companies to invite people to play some games, and then based upon how they actually score in those games, they will get matched to a member company. And so there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I think even using a chatbot or using some of that technology to continue to engage these people when they have been rejected, but you still want them to be part of the community. Okay, so can we go on to the next question? Is that okay? Jared, is this
Sure.
one that you're going to take? What is the most challenging recruiting problem you are solving or hoping to solve with AI, and what solutions are available that you could recommend to our audience?
Yeah, so I think for us, the most pressing issue is just how do we get through all of the candidates, right? And how do we identify who is the best candidate? We've worked a lot with our internal data science team to look at things like long-term success in the role, look at things like goal attainment, performance metrics, and how do we take and use that data that we've gathered, that big data, and bring it into our recruiting process to drive change. And I think that's through really the use of AI. But we know, for instance, for some of our hard-to-fill roles, we hire 1 in 30, 1 in 50 people. So the amount of time that it takes to screen that many people to get through the qualification, to get through everything that we need to, is significant, right? So there's opportunity there to use AI to continue to refine that, but it's not for us. It's not and I think that's one thing that people are like, oh no, you're going to actually replace recruiters. We'll never replace recruiters. And long term, we see that opportunity to reinvest it into other areas.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone have something else they'd like to add on challenges? I think the sheer amount of data is one of those challenges that AI is hopefully going to solve or at least mitigate for many departments.
I think one of the things I see in a lot of people in talent acquisition are trying to come up with what I'll call the perfect stack. Mm-hmm. It's like if I just buy Jibe, or if I just buy Jibe plus, whatever ATS plus whatever CRM plus whatever, and they all work harmoniously together. I think there's just a lot of talent that gets lost in the cracks across all of these different platforms. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I think, in recruiting, they say that you recruit for skills and titles, but you hire for culture and personality. And there's still, to me, an amazing lack of that kind of content or data or searchability within the job contents. And companies still haven't done what I call this micro-branding work, where I might have a company culture that's at the top, but every single hiring manager runs his teams in a different way, right? So imagine going to a career site And instead of searching for a design job, search for a design job that is working for a type A manager that's short-term burst projects where I can work on a very small team. You can't do that stuff, and yet that's exactly how people would want to search for jobs. So there's a lot that can be done around how you could harvest that information and that data and collate it and put it into the search mechanisms or even the matching algorithms that I think AI is going to do. But I think AI, as it shows up, it's going to show up in 1,000 different point solutions. I think it's not going to show up as a single platform play. But I also think it can solve cross-platform problems in really powerful ways. And I think the right AI solutions providers are going to figure out how to traverse talent from first touch through onboarding and even through their lifetime careers when you work with the right platforms.
Yeah, integration is one of those issues too that HR can be a leader on, where other departments are going to need the same thing.
At the risk of making some people unhappy with me in the room at this comment, I do think that there is a huge amount of hiring prevention that goes on. When we meet with HR teams and they're like, I posted this job and I got 300, resumes, but no one was the right fit. And then you look at the job description that they put out there, and then you sort of start peeling back the onion, and you're like, well, what ATS system are you using? And everybody has a different ATS system that they use, and none of them are the same. None of them really speak the same language. And when I mentioned earlier the 3 different silos of HR, when you have teams that don't talk to each other, and you have a job description, and it goes to legal, and legal puts their input on it, and then it gets posted, and then you have people who are applying for jobs who don't really understand how to create a resume. Maybe they go to their career center, they get a resume, they put it out there, they don't use some of the resources that are out there. Their resumes aren't going to get parsed, right? So I think there's a multi-prong approach that needs to start happening and changing in the marketplace that makes it easier, because as a company and a consultant for other companies in this space, it's really shocking when I hear on the news unemployment is so low, but yet I know so many people who are working 2 or 3 jobs to sustain themselves and to just, pay their rent, pay their insurance, pay their car payment. And then they're qualified for the job, they send the resume out, but they never get a call back, right? And that's really where I think AI can have a meaningful difference in connecting the candidates with the jobs and the companies and finding the gaps, right, that some of us overlook because of some of our inherent biases.
Yeah, and putting forth that consistent candidate experience from the first interaction they have to either getting hired or not in the future.
Look, I think a lot of the obstacles are self-imposed by us as employers, right? I mean, when you think about the heart of most ATS and historical hiring systems, their bias is to disqualify candidates, right? Every one of us has an ATS system that has what in it? Knockout questions, right? But what's the opposite of that? What could have been built to help us to actually identify the characteristics and attributes of talent, irrespective of requisition, that would help us to go, we've got somebody we're going to hire. And how do we relate to them? How do we identify them? How do we even take that in? There's almost no way to take that kind of data into a talent community or other type of a system. And so as I work with some of the AI folks, I'm like, because we all have this let's find a needle in a haystack mentality, and I've rarely met an employer that says I'm going to hire the whole damn haystack, right? At some point, most of the talent at whatever point I might actually want them in my employment. So how do I relate to that? How do I bring that in? And some of the better AI technologies that I've seen, for example, are going through a conversational experience with someone when they want to work for them. And one of the best ones is, hey, are you 18? And in the old days, if I was on a web form-based system and I said no, it said goodbye. The new chatbots say, when do you turn 18? Right. And I'm going to follow up with you. And they're, if you can't work full-time? Can you do part-time? And you're not right for the general manager job, but you're right for this other job. They're literally doing this coin sorting methodology that's actually bringing the talent into the appropriate positions, like a good recruiter would if your predisposition was to try to hire everybody, as opposed to disqualifying people, which is also a personality trait of a lot of different recruiters. So I think it's going to be, I think 5 to 7 years from now, it's going to be an amazingly different world, because I don't know that there's a talent shortage. I think there's an attention shortage. And I think there's still a lot of friction in the process, not only from search, but also from relating to talent.
But what I like about what you're saying too is that it really facilitates learning agility and the appreciation of learning agility, that if you gain a skill set down the road, that we're paying attention to that, and it's something we might actually want. Okay, we are going to move to now question 3. What are the most substantial obstacles you'll face or concerns you have around implementing AI solutions? Wahab, would you like to take us away with that one?
Sure. So I thought about this one for quite a bit. It was like, I can just give the obvious answer, which for me is diversity and inclusion. If I think back to, I guess my own like personal story and how I got into tech, I don't think that I would have sort of been sourced out by any sort of scalable AI solution, right? So you mentioned that I worked at Carnegie Mellon University, and back then I was on a diversity recruiting team, and our motto was essentially that diversity is anything that's not well represented in whatever environment or community that you are working in, right? So for Carnegie Mellon University, top engineering school in Pittsburgh, a white male from the state of Montana was an extremely diverse candidate for us, because there aren't a lot of people from Montana walking around Pittsburgh, right? Oh, we got somebody from Montana here. How many other white males from Montana in the room? You are a diverse person, sir, to me. So, but my point is, I think in recruiting, a lot of times success to me is in 2 prongs. So from like a manager's perspective, I want to implement infrastructure and tools that allow us to operate at scale efficiently and fast. But for my recruiters and people who are working with recs, I want them to have the flexibility and the creativity to take chances, is what I call it. Is take chances on people, right? And so, one of the things that I wouldn't call it nervous. One of the things I would sort of encourage those who are implementing AI is, as much as it is to enable scale, you also have to begin to think about how can I enable this technology and these solutions to unearth diverse talent, whatever that might mean for your organization, because it definitely varies. And so I would say that's probably a substantial obstacle, and something that we need to have as much conversation around, scaling up and saving people time and making things more efficient, around using the same technology to find a needle in the haystack, as I believe you mentioned earlier.
Okay. Any of the other panelists want to add to that? Jared?
So I think a lot of the obstacles that we have are either rules and regulations that we put in place on our teams, or they're in response to laws or legislation that may be in place. And so one thing that comes to mind is we interview based upon date of application with a lot of our requisitions. That is inherently, incentivizes people that are the first to apply, right? So if we have a requisition that has 50 to 100 people that have applied within, we'll say, a week, we might only get through the first 10 candidates because we found somebody in those first 10 candidates who we think is great, right? Fits the bill. But perhaps day 5, candidate number 40 that's applied is a better fit, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity with AI to turn that process on its side and rethink how we go about it. I think the biggest obstacle a lot of people have when they implement AI solutions, although, is getting through legal and compliance, right? I think that's been a pretty significant undertaking, looking at the impacts, looking at how we're going to handle your personal data at CEW, how we're going to collect your biometric data, to really kind of be on the forefront of that versus having to answer those questions, kind of on the back end. And how, there are a lot of solutions, I will tell you, within AI that you might just be able to flip the switch on, right? But when you get into things that you're going to be using for screening tools, right? Assessment-based tools. Those are not just necessarily plug and play, right? You might have to do a job analysis. You might have to do a validation study on your population, and those take time.
Okay, Doug, this one is for you. What can recruiting managers do today to prepare to effectively integrate AI into their operations? So let's get down to the advice portion.
Well, for everyone in recruiting, how many of you have had your vendors all call you within the last 6 months and tell you that they've got AI coming, right? Everybody. Look, the thing that I see is there's a great tension with companies that want to bring AI in and the worry factor of what are the recruiters going to think, because there's articles about it and everything. So my AI tip of the day is that when you start to look at AI, use AI in the sense of help your recruiters stay aware of what you're thinking about doing and involve them. So one of the greatest things that can happen is to build micro teams of research where you can let even your own recruiters say, is there crappy parts of your job that we could automate using some AI? And let them go do the research. Let them go out. One of the funnest experiments I've ever seen done in almost all of the global companies that I've helped work with is when they sit down and plot out all the pathways and all the redundant conversations and all of the messaging that happens as you relate to your candidate populations. And all of a sudden you can start to see patterns and you can start to see best practices. I've seen groups say, oh man, I use this email to reach out to candidates and I'm getting an 80% response rate. Every other recruiter on the world wants to copy that, right? And go use that as their next LinkedIn social connecting kind of a thing. And yet I'm amazed at how siloed most recruiters are. And so as you think about using AI, at the end of the day, it's really more about automated interactions than it is about artificial intelligence when you really think about what you're trying to do. You're trying to automate the interactions with candidates. You're trying to automate the interactions with profiles of people that maybe applied in the past. You're trying to automate how you schedule interviews. A lot of these things are the things that kill the time that it takes recruiters, and they'd prefer not to do it anyhow. They want to work on relationship and they want to work on results at the end of the day. And if there's technology that can manage and facilitate all of that at scales that recruiters could never think about, while simultaneously synchronizing that data with your legacy system so you can do reporting to make the lawyers and everyone feel like we're actually monitoring this, and if it is making decisions, we want to know how it got to those decisions for qualification or disqualification. But I think as long as you have some of those basic things in place, and by the way, how many of you have a budget right now in your budget item for next year to do AI research and development? How many? 2. So this is what chronically happens in talent acquisition, right? We tin cup to go get a budget because I got to hire 2,000 people and the hiring managers all give me $5 each. And then I run out of money by June and I either have to kill a vendor in order to try something. I rarely have seen a talent acquisition leader really strategically budget and have money and project time set up for this kind of thing. And yet we all know it's coming and we all know we need to do it. And by the way, it's the fun part, right, of experimentation that we get to do. Because every talent acquisition leader would love to get to this time next year and say, I implemented AI in my company and it increased our productivity by 400% and saved us $80 million and every job was filled by December 31st, right? I'm joking, by the way. That's not really... But at the end of the day, I think that's what we're after, and just a few basic things can help you to prep for that kind of stuff really, really well.
There's one thing I just want to say about the relationship of humans to what AI is working on. So not only do we as recruiters want to focus on relationships and therefore really be meaningful in terms of the contribution that we're making, but we also have to be careful. In the book, we talk about a concept called Humanintheloop, where we may have entire processes automated, but I think what Doug said about not being able to just blindly trust the decisions that AI is making because it's either based on a business case or it's based on the rules that you've developed. There needs to be a human recruiter that's watching out for this process and recognizing when issues of bias, for example, pop up, or someone is being declined when they really shouldn't be, because machines aren't perfect and they're programmed by humans who are less perfect. So having that human in the loop, I think, is really important. You need to be careful not to automate huge swaths of your recruiting tasks without having kind of this oversight.
By the way, some of the best AI companies that I've seen, and I've seen quite a few of them, they actually measure themselves based upon how many monthly human interventions are needed as a part of their technology.
Wow. That's great.
So they're not only integrating the need for humans to potentially have to get engaged at any time if the conversation wobbles. They're smart to do that, but they actually measure themselves by how can we keep improving the AI so we meet the consumer need of the candidate for whatever they're trying to accomplish and do it with as low of a percentage of interaction as possible.
That's great.
I think one of the things that's, for me, as a business person, entrepreneur, in a lot of different types of businesses and companies, is to really embrace the change. And innovation is something that isn't going to go away. And if innovation does start to go away, then we all need to be a little bit concerned. I think people who are recruiters and in the HR space, this is a chance to really change how your departments are being done, how you recruit people, how you hire people, how you place people. This is an opportunity, I think, to really fly and soar. And I think that there are so many tools out there that are affordable, that are scalable. So your tin cup with your $5, I think $5 of AI goes way farther than, $5 of trying to bring in multiple people to do jobs and review resumes. There's only so many hours in a day. And it's been my experience in the HR space that, and the recruiting space, that you all are the first people that everybody blames when the person isn't a right fit, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, well, nice job, Sparkles. You need to be better at your job. But the HR teams are the ones that are, rift first. When there's a reduction in force and people look to lay people off, what's the first department hit? HR. Yet, what's the most important part of any company? The employees. The employees are the heartbeat of every company, of every organization. And if we can use AI to make your jobs easier and it's more cost effective, then you all do a better job at your job, and you get I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but maybe the respect and the the appreciation of how hard it is to find that needle in a haystack, how hard it is to bring culture from an individual to a company and the company culture to that individual. I think that this is one of the first time in years that you can really revolutionize the space that you're in. So.
Right. And it's the human value, the human skills that we bring to this. Okay, we have 10 minutes left for audience questions. So who would like to kick us off in the audience and ask our panelists what's on their minds?
I'm Jeremy Vayon from ServiceNow. Thank you very much for the panel and the enlightened discussion. How do we solve, or how is AI solving right now for a problem that's endemic, or at least it's built in to the challenge of recruiting at the university or recent graduate level, which is that even if you cast a wide net, the length of time for experience from the candidates, or even the depth of their experience, is lower than in comparison with experienced hires. So where are we seeing some movement on being able to use AI to its potential in that space?
So I guess I'm not gonna answer your question, but I'll tell you what I've been doing. So obviously we meet with a lot of vendors, who sort of come in and say, hey, here's some things we can do for you, etc. I think one of the things that I try to recruit for and we try to recruit for is aptitude for learning. So from an engineering perspective, today we're using, I'm going to name some random coding languages, but like Scala, Go, C++, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And tomorrow, my VP of engineering may come to me and say, hey, Wahab, scrap all of that. We're going to be this kind of a shop now. I need this now, right? And there's no way that I could just automatically turn around and start to only recruit for that language. So what we actually do is we recruit for the aptitude to learn, right? So what in your experience, what in your background can show us that when you're giving something new, you're going to be able to pick it up quickly, right? And that's what I've been telling vendors is, hey, you go figure out a way to figure this out for me, right? And then you become a very interesting vendor for me in the university space.
Yeah, so I think Maybe I'll answer it a little bit more directly, just from some of our use cases of how we used AI at CDW. So I think there's an opportunity on the front end from a sourcing standpoint, specifically in regards to how are we providing access for students to get considered by somebody like CDW or other Fortune 500 companies. So we are utilizing some systems to have students play games as a part of kind of a community of companies, and then based upon how you score in those games, you're getting matched with one of the member companies by this third party. And I think that that is a great way. The candidates that we are getting are already, they're the caliber of candidates that we have seen has been much higher. I think there are other ways, though, that you can deploy AI internally, particularly when you have early candidates that may not necessarily have the resumes or the skills listed on them. And it's using other technologies to screen, whether it's an assessment, whether it's a video on-demand interview. So actually right now we're in the process of finalizing a contract with a vendor where we'll turn on the AI overlay of a video interview. We've used the video interview provider for over 10 years and utilize that to help us make a refined hiring decision on candidates and drive productivity throughout a recruiting process. There's a whole bunch of other pluses, I will say, like how do we provide a realistic job preview for our candidates and additional experiences that we'll be able to accomplish via rolling this out.
I love the emphasis on gamification because the students love that.
Correct.
Yeah, so, and then something I just thought about is, university, and this is an area I'm really passionate about, if you guys can't tell, but university is an extremely high-touch recruiting process, and it's very weird because you go through this fall season where it's like go, 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 and then all of a sudden this person that you've hired is probably not going to start for like 6 to 8 months. But then in addition, the decision-making process goes from you meet somebody in August maybe, and then all of a sudden there's this deadline, and then it's very fast at the end, right? And I think one of the things that you'd want to avoid with whatever it is you do is to not eliminate too much of that high touch that happens throughout the process, because the analogy I like to use is it's almost like dating, right? And so you have somebody that you've met who's been in this long-term relationship with maybe CDW, right? And here comes Rubric at the final hour saying, hey, I know you've been with CDW for 5 years, but I promise you, come into a relationship with me, start your career with Rubric, and it'll be okay, right? It's very hard to do that. And so you have to kind of use the entire recruiting process before you even know that somebody's going to get an offer to really start to recruit the person and close the person as a candidate. So you got to kind of walk a fine line there, right? Which is why I think it's super important to really start the process at the top of the funnel in terms of sourcing and figuring out how to unearth that talent early.
Thanks, Wahab. All right, I've been given the 5-minute warning that I'm standing between you and your lunch. So here's what I would like to do. Does anyone else in the audience have a question? Raise your hand if you do.
Okay, so really quickly, I thank you for sharing the information on the recruiting and how we'd get through selection, et cetera. Are you seeing from any of the companies who've integrated AI a improvement on retention?
I think it's really too soon to tell, right? I mean, I think that a lot of our performance metrics that we look at, just the amount of time that it takes to hire somebody, not only to hire somebody, but to start to see ROI on that investment, it's a while, right? I mean, I think we're talking, 18 to 24 months down the road with some of these investments. So
it's good to have those numbers.
I've seen companies that have deployed at scale AI that it's been their single biggest way to save and retain employees, because the chat conversation not only went through the recruiting conversation, it went through and started to ask the candidate after they started, a week after they started, how's it going, right? Because if you're with a bad boss or a bad team or something's not working out, to be able to have the chatbot say, how's it going? And you're like, it's not good. Well, we need to get you into something different, right? You're onboarded, you're trained, you're in the benefit system, you're in payroll, and sometimes those simple changes as a basic follow-up. So making sure you're working with the technology that thinks more about the whole life cycle of the candidates versus just recruiting will really help with retention.
Right?
Ditto.
Ditto. Did we have a final question?
Hi. So quick question. You mentioned that machines have the possibility to take some of the jobs that we currently have. Do you think that women and people with disabilities, especially for the hard of hearing people, will be further sidelined? what is the solution to ensure that they are not sidelined and they get more equal participation in the job market? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the obstacles and sort of maybe challenges that we discussed earlier. You know, AI, I guess, has the power to save a lot of time. And I would argue that some of that time needs to be used to unearth diverse talent. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, diverse talent is however you'd like to define it. And so gender is a big area. Ethnicity and race is another big area. And if recruiters have more, who can spend more of their time doing things that don't scale to unearth extremely talented people and bring them through the process in a high-touch way, I think it can be a benefit. And that's sort of like the collateral of, hey, I've been able to save a lot of time with this AI, but now I can utilize that time for folks who perhaps may have fallen through the cracks.
I would just say that AI, I think, can really help eliminate the bias. I mean, I think it can eliminate, you know, are you, you know, a woman? Are you a man? Are you, you know, like all of those questions. There are things that you can put in to filter out. And each company is going to have sort of a different standard. But I think, you know, we're moving toward an environment where people are less and less tolerant of people who are being biased. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, this is one foot in front of the other, one step forward. And I mean, I think it's really an exciting time where, you know, sort of the sky's the limit as we become less biased ourselves and more open. That'll be a reflection in the programs and the software that we develop.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank our panelists, Jennifer, Wahab, Doug, and Jared, and thank you all for being part of our commentary today on Humanity Works and AI in recruiting. Thank you.